Welcome, welcome, welcome. How is the energy today? Are you guys excited? Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, are you guys excited?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, okay, some energies here. We have a full panel today. Welcome, welcome everyone. Let's start with a quick round of intro. Do we want to start in the back?
Hi, Steve Pack from RockSolid. We just launched last week. We're a liquid vault platform, single-click access to the best of DeFi, and we just launched in partnership with the RockSolid protocol.
Hello, I'm Eric Sarnecki. I'm one of the co-founders of Digital Asset and the Canton Network. We're the only public blockchain with privacy, several $1 trillion of RWA TVL. It's used by some of the largest financial institutions in the world.
All right, this is on. Wonderful. Hey guys, Smokey over here, co-founder, CEO of Berachain. We're an EVM identical L1 powered by proof of liquidity, allowing the chain to help power the applications building on top of the network.
Hi, I'm James Hunsaker, co-founder of Monad, and now I am running Category Labs, which is the labs entity building technology for Monad.
Nice. What's up, everyone? I'm Francisco. I'm leading developer relation at Consensus. That's the umbrella company of MetaMask, Linea, Infura, and others. So excited to have this panel. We'll speak about kind of like the next DeFi era, security, trust, but most important, we will kind of like cover from retail to kind of like institutional adoption. So let's get it started with a little bit like, the context here. Like, what do you guys think is kind of like the main gap that today we have in order to get more institution on board?
Where do you want to start?
Anyone can jump in.
Yeah, I think one thing we used to say, the institutions are coming, they're here, right? And like a lot of the newcomers, like they're experts in public markets, right? In raising capital, in dealing with regulators, in reporting to auditors, but not experts in DeFi, right? And so there's a lot of opportunity for us as an industry to help them in, obviously. And our focus is obviously vaults. And when a new institution is trying to figure out how to deploy to DeFi, they don't want the answer to be, here are the 17 protocols and 17 chains you should go to. They want it to be simple. And so that's sort of like being that single interface, that can be tailored to the needs of the given institution. That's our piece. That's how we're trying to help institutions get on.
I think market structure is more or less fundamentally broken in the crypto space. It's not like because anyone made a wrong decision. It's actually a result of being rejected by TradFi for the past 15 years. So we've forced a lot of things to be vertically integrated that really shouldn't be. There's no reason that an exchange is also your clearinghouse, is also your custodian, or that where you're doing trading is doing your margining. And if you want to bring the scale that would really 10 or 100x these ecosystems, separation of concerns is a criticality, and making sure that you bring in the entities that are the right ones to operate the different layers so that I don't have to trust a chain to be my custodian and my clearinghouse and price discovery and all my revenue distribution. If we can separate this out into more horizontal structures, then we would get much better scale.
Yeah, I think I would echo some of the points that were made. The biggest thing that I've actually seen is probably a combination of compliance and ease of use / access, in that a number of these institutions have very different standards for underwriting what actually risk looks like. And I'd say the models that are on chain, whether it's the Cadora types or sort of your stick a finger in the air, have been incomplete might be a generous term, and under development might be a better one. In that there's still so many factors that people don't know in terms of what they're actually underwriting, and it's a bit of a wild west in general, right? So on one hand, as you said, right, making sure you don't have to go through a category list of a billion different combinations of chains and protocols, but on the other hand, actually understanding what you're depositing into, what the various underlying risks are, what the yield is coming from, everything in between is massive for these sources. Even just something as simple as if you're on a network, what is the distribution of the keys? Who holds the keys to the multi-sig? Is there bridge risk? Everything in between is just, I think there are things that we take for granted, having been in the space in many cases for as long as we have. But the things that are, abnormal from a traditional lens, right? So,
well, we're willing to take the risk. We're first movers. We want the edge,
of course.
But scale doesn't have the same risk tolerance that early adopters do. So
exactly,
you're
and there's a
going
mismatch.
you're going to have to do that style of reporting and segregation if you want that next level of scale.
100%. And actually, just before this, I was talking to some of the guys from Turtle Club who are starting to work with all these major LPs, and I'm sure are interacting with many of the protocols in this panel. And I think they've seen the exact same thing. So they're actually starting to roll out that sort of an institutional risk framework internally that they're hoping to standardize with the help of a number of these different institutions. So, hopefully we move towards something like that in the future.
Yeah, like financial institutions is a very highly regulated industry, and there's a number of. It's a very profitable industry and a very highly regulated industry, and so I can imagine that most large financial institutions are very risk adverse to put any sort of their traditional business at risk of either regulatory concerns or just general sort of reputational concerns. So I think that's probably the biggest.
I don't think it's fair to
impediment.
call the institutions risk averse, though. I mean, it's a reflection of their customers, right? The audience that's crypto native already are much more risk loving than your average investor or your average participant. And again, when you're talking about scale, you're talking about getting out of the long end of the curve of the risk loving people and finding the much more risk normalized people. So they're more a reflection of their constituency or their customers. I don't think it's appropriate to blame them. And what they're doing is they're saying, well, I need to know certain things and I need to have certain capabilities to be able to appeal to my customers. And so I think it's not appropriate to necessarily, I don't think you're doing it explicitly. I just wanted to call it out.
I think one thing that's happening is we're all kind of becoming enterprise sales experts if we weren't before. And one thing you learn in enterprise sales is like the buyer doesn't want to get fired. So like, how do you make sure that's the kind of thing like, why do you buy IBM? Why do you buy Cisco? Like, it's not because they're innovative. It's because they're solid. And we're all going through that, I think, now.
Yeah, I agree with different parts, right? And like thinking about like also like DeFi in general, right? We touch both institution but also like retail. Like, what are the things that the gaps not for institutional side, but actually for retails for DeFi specific, not just usability, right? I don't know what's your take on that?
About what the gaps are?
Yes, around kind of like general DeFi adoption.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think it gets back to like simplicity and like what's the user experience. A few years ago, it was like, how do you onboard someone onto crypto? And the whole seed phrase thing was the problem. And it's like, okay, that's still terrible a lot of the time, but like getting better. Yep. But now it's like, okay, like someone's on, what's their experience in DeFi? And again, if you're left with like, here are 17 protocols, like it's just a terrible experience. And even like platforms that I think do a better job of this, like I like DeFi Saver, for example. It's cool. It's still a panel with like 17 things to choose from, right? That's not the experience that like mainstream expect. It's almost like in TradFi, instead of telling your mate to buy an index fund, to tell him to do options trading and stock picking. So again, that's where like vaults I think can help both retail, right? It's like, here's the thing, like the single button, here's what you're getting, it's clear, we'll take care of it for you. And that applies to retail as well as it does to institutions who like want to know what's happening, but like don't want to have a whole IT team to deal with it.
I think the question is like, are you asking for more users, or are you asking for the existing users to use more products? And I remember like working at retail banks like Wells Fargo, that they take somebody who has a checking account or a mortgage or a credit card and they try to like expand them out to use more products. They already have that person as a customer and they just want them to use more. So I think if you're talking about like DeFi adoption on the retail side, like, is it people who are already accustomed to using crypto, using it for more things? Or are you talking about new users that don't use crypto at all? And if you're talking about new users, I think there's just sort of society perception of crypto being, a lot of people still say it's scammy, and there's they don't have trust and all this sort of thing. So in terms of solving that, I think it's going to be sort of the apps that people use already, like the PayPals, the Venmos, kind of adding crypto to them, and then they just slowly get accustomed and say, hey, like I trust PayPal, I trust Venmo, and they have crypto, and I've used it now. That's just going to take a time and to build up that adoption for new users.
I think that when we look at like the most arguably successful example of like retail coming into DeFi, for better or for worse, it was like Luna/Anchor, right? I mean, people were like, okay, I can get 20% on my stables or on my dollars. Why wouldn't I do this? I would be silly not to. Now, of course, that came with a pretty deep dagger as well, in that, people did not, in fact, know where the yield was coming from, and that kind of played itself out. But I would actually argue that nowadays, whether that's Aave Athena or using, plasma vaults or whatever it might be, you can actually achieve non-trivial yields on stablecoins that meaningfully outperform your basic T-bill, some of your private credit funds, all the stuff in between, right? So when I think about it, it's a matter of two things. One, making a project that's just so simple, stupid, that people do not have to think, oh my God, DeFi is scary. They think, okay, this is my bank, but better. And, I press two buttons, I sign in with my Apple ID, I buy some coins in the same way as I would on-ramp from a bank effectively and call it a day and press earn. And on the other hand, like James said, actually finding ways to integrate with these partners that can get you somewhere. So like, for example, Berachain kind of made an opinionated choice to have PayPal USD as one of the backings for our native stablecoin. And it's actually the most prevalent network for PYUSD outside of Solana and Ethereum. But they are still jumping through all of the hoops of actually integrating it into their global payments apps and going from, hey, we're distributing it to a few thousand people in DeFi rails to 400 million users across the entire world. And that's a step shift, right? So I think it'll be pretty slow, but the last 3 to 6 months between Robinhood, Stripe, God knows what else, Circle, all seem to be trending in the right direction for making it easier for people to do useful things on chain that they would do whether they knew it had crypto under the hood or not.
Yeah, I mean, to add on your point is that we see definitely like what, do you guys hear? Oh, it's better.
Yeah.
No, what kind of like Vitalik is mentioning around kind of like low DeFi, right? So right now, even like stuff like liquidity pool rebalancing agents is definitely like getting much more inside like a retail trust, right? Because you know what either the agent or what actually you're doing. It's not kind of some kind of like black box. And to add on your pick, James, here, also like I think like we are in our echo chamber, right? So what is happening? We need to actually build for the next generation of user coming. And one example is on MetaMask side, we unified swap and bridge. A lot of people were like, oh, why you did that? This is not great, right? But a lot of people actually come in the space, they actually swap directly without even knowing they're bridging, right? So the functionality also need to be adaptive on the market that you're getting into. So I think that's one part. And then we touch a bit on trade-offs, right? And maybe, I don't know, Eric or anyone can jump in here, but I'm also like thinking, everyone wants performance. People until they are hacked, they care about security. Everyone wants scalability. We are still building so many kind of like liquidity and user and developer islands. They are sometimes not speaking with each other. At least now we're starting to speak about multi-chain interoperability, omni accounts, so that's great. But what are really the trade-offs here, both for institutional retail, that we can play for thinking about scalability and decentralization? Because obviously like we need to, we need to think about sacrificing some cyberpunk value to get actually to performance and scalability and institutional adoption.
I mean, I don't know that the common retail participant gives a shit about either of those things. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a real mistake that we pretend that crypto is about going directly to the retail audience. Like even MetaMask is an intermediation of a user. Mm-hmm. And even though it's a lot thinner client than maybe a full bank stack would be, we leak so much information through to the user that isn't ultimately relevant to them. I think we lack a language to explain and disclose what risks people are taking. We have that language already in traditional financial markets. People understand the risks that they're taking and how it relates to them and how to think about whether or not they're at that risk profile. So I just think that my own personal soapbox is that I think that one of the biggest mistakes this space makes is reinventing words for things that we've had for 50 years already. Yeah. Looping, it's leverage. Stop it. Oh, yeah. Shut up. Come on. Stop saying looping. All these words. I mean, hell, in early Bitcoin, we abused the word SPV to just mean a client, instead of, special purpose vehicle like anybody in finance would think about it. So it's just a real abusive language, and then that reinforces the bubble, makes it very inaccessible because I have to learn a whole new language. And a lot of it is often used in very cleverly to disguise the risk. Who remembers AMM yield farming? You're short volatility in an extra put. Again, people know how to measure that in traditional financial markets, but they have no idea what AMM yield farming is. You got to learn what an AMM is, how it works, what the source of the funds are. I was going through your site before you started. You have very clean language about the source of the yield in your vaults. It was very refreshing to see.
Thank you.
So, I think that everybody needs to grow up a little bit. It's been fun. It's been a lot of fun in the experiment, but at least use the language of the world that you're trying to go and win, and embrace the fact that you have to be a little bit clearer in your reporting and your explanation about what people are getting into.
Yeah, the decentralization trade-off, we actually face that in a very real world because our launch community, Rocket Pool, right? That's the sort of decentralization maxi. It's like Ethereum's decentralized, right? Like that's one of the main value propositions. It's credibly neutral. Rocket Pool also. And so we had to think through, okay, well, what are the trade-offs? Like if we were to build a fully decentralized vault, what would it look like? And there is a way to do it. It's like token holders vote on strategies, like all the code gets deployed on chain, it gets voted on and gets approved. Only then do funds get deployed. What's the trade-off? Like you can't move quickly. You can't get the APR. And so I love that Ethereum makes that trade-off. I love that Rocket Pool makes the trade-off. But as the sort of DeFi layer for a token, like it's the wrong trade-off. Like it's better to have some trust assumptions and be able to move quickly. And so yeah, just got to be clear. Like we try and be transparent. Like yeah.
Help people understand the trade-off that they're taking when they do that. And also, I think one of the nice things of having had the better part of a decade underneath us and all the different chain experiments is that things like Base are showing that this decentralization thing is more noise than necessarily what people really care about. So getting the market validation about what changes people's behavior and does the pace of a chain and this outcome and that matter more than decentralization. And we have another 5-10 years until we see what really the long-term effects of some of those trade-offs are.
I think that I would kind of agree that we're moving past the era of like performative decentralization, right? Where it's like we're decentralized because that's why crypto is good and that's the only reason. I think we're moving a lot more into an era of TradFi x crypto. We're moving into the world where payments are interesting, where access to easy credit is interesting, where verifiability and transparency of transactions for any member of purposes is fascinating and actually a real business use case, right? I do think there's something to be said about having some threshold at which it's like, yes, this network is not dependent on a single point of failure, absolutely. Right? But I also think that you never want to be like fighting for second place, as in most networks are not going to end up being more decentralized than Ethereum, if we're to speak realistically about it, right?
Yeah.
And I'd also even pose like a bit of the devil's advocate question of like, does an institution, does a retail counterparty, does anyone necessarily want to have a decentralized counterparty in the case where something goes wrong? I think a lot of people, for better or for worse, like to have the safety net of, oh shit, I pressed the wrong button, I can call my banker, or oh shit, I did this, I can contact customer support. As problematic as that can also be at times, right?
I mean, look at all the corporate chains. They're all picking their validator set. They're saying we want enough decentralization to present neutral and to have resilience, but enough known entities that we can step in if we need to. And that's a trade-off that they're very consciously making.
Exactly, right? And maybe that is what the path looks like going forward. Maybe it's this 2/3 quorum type of thing where there's enough, you're checking the box, especially in light of potential regulatory environments in the future, which we do not know the outcomes of. But you're also looking at practical outcomes and where the space is moving. So that's sort of my instinct of where we go over time. And James, I'd be pretty curious for your take on this because I feel like you guys talk a lot about this at Monad.
Yeah, I mean, do people really care? Like, if people cared, for example, about privacy, they wouldn't use Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Like, do people are very comfortable living in the world that's been created over thousands of years of creating laws and having, you can sue somebody, right? And so I think like, having a judge resolve a dispute or having some government agency resolve a dispute. So, and on the crypto side, in terms of like, there's been a lot of effort to try to replicate these governance sort of systems in crypto. And can we, use computers to coordinate, collaboration amongst people to resolve disputes or, upgrade smart contracts or something like that, resolve issues. I think there's still a long ways to go there. I think from the cypherpunk values, it's there for some people there is a time where you don't want society to decide what's best for you. I think a case that some of my Russian friends bring up is the failure of the USSR, right, and the ability to move their capital out, and there was those people, some of them are I have very good friends that left USSR during the fall down, and like they're traumatized. They have like PTSD, and it's like, I don't know, that was 20, 30 years ago, right? And they still have, sorry, way over 30 years ago. They still have PTSD from that experience, and you know, it's just something. Yeah, if your life is going swimmingly and everything's great, you don't think about these things. But it's when you have something happen that it becomes an issue. And so I think, yes, will people bias towards these sort of values? Will they give up something else like convenience to get better privacy? Probably not. I just don't. Society, just general people don't operate that way. But if they could have the convenience and the privacy, then they would probably choose that, right? And so, in a way, it's something that you have to like put in their life, and then they will notice if you take it away.
Mm-hmm. No, makes sense. Do you feel? I mean, a consequence of that will be obviously, you know, liquidity, fragmentation, different kind of like island where you build kind of like, you know, fully. Just fully different kind of like ecosystems, right? I just would like to know, is this something that we should care about? Fragmentation around, liquidity, around building different ecosystem, or you feel like, oh, that's good to have, but it will solve by itself eventually, because a lot of kind of like stables will kind of like go away. A lot of kind of those islands will not get enough developer adoption to get more dApps ecosystem adoption. So I'm just want to ask, what's your approach around this fully fragmentation? Because I think it's getting worse. Everybody's spinning their own smart account. I having like to fund 50 different dApps just while I want to do something. Yes, it's abstract more the way, but it's also like creating more entry point for on the security side, and more entry point to divide the journey to onboard me as a user, or me as a founder, or me as an institution. So I just would like to understand what's your approach around this liquidity fragmentation and ecosystem fragmentation.
There's a tweet that lives rent-free in my head that says, "Congratulations, we've invented hyper-fragmented money." And it really, really fucks with me a lot. But I think the terminal state is obvious. We land in a place where there's 2 or 3 chains and stablecoins. I think it's also pretty clear that we'll have more before we have less. The only thing I can't really envision in my own mind is the path of going down to 2 or 3. But generally speaking, both stablecoins and chains need to think like networks. I like to ask people, like, what are the most successful public permissionless networks in human history? And the 2 best answers I've heard are the internet and the US dollar. And you really have to think of the neutrality of those systems and the prevalence of those systems and the network effects of those systems very similarly, both money and the underlying substrate. So the network effects, and that's another thing, we've abused the word network as human beings because you get better multiples when you call a platform a network or a database a network. So I think that if you are really focused on what does a true network mean, ultimately you'll land with 1, 2, maximally 3. But in the short term, the fragmentation is enabling innovation, which is a good thing. And then the world will coalesce around those innovations that are, on average, the most useful. And I think that permissionless, just general innovation is worth it right now. The fragmentation is an unfortunate side effect.
Yeah. I think, like, from the UX point of view, the user doesn't want to know, right? Unless there's a very specific reason. And there may be, right? Like, you can imagine the sort of Ethereum becomes the greater than $1 billion transfer network, but like one of these stablecoin ones is or one of you guys, is the stablecoin ones. We obviously take advantage of it because with fragmentation comes incentive to attract capital, and that's something that we can offer to vault providers. So we actually don't mind the fact that there's fragmentation right now. There's some alpha there for vault depositors, but I don't think, that's the long term either.
I think it's a matter of understanding, what the role of every different thing in the ecosystem is, right? I think that the areas that get kind of sillier when you have, 2 or 3 DEXs or lending markets that have nearly identical structures with the tiniest tweaks, all vying for the same pool of capital. It actually kind of reminds me of like all these DATs that you're seeing nowadays on the Nasdaq. It's like, why do you have 4 Solana traders, right? Like, I understand if they go to Korea or if they go to UAE and you attract a different user base or a different function. But I think to the same extent for DeFi applications, you have to know who owns what. And I think when building an ecosystem, it's thoughtful to be, purposeful about like, which application is supposed to fuel which role, right? Is this for weird exotic collateral? Is this for leverage or looping, as Eric would say, right? Is this for, high frequency trading? Is this for an order book? Like, what's supposed to do what? I think there's little things that you can do that can make that more efficient at scale. So you can have these like meta wrappers for different types of LSTs for ETH or Bitcoin. You can have means of better aggregating stable coins into a meta wrapper. But at the end of the day, I think it is tough to avoid in the short term. The best thing that you can try to do is ensure that that fragmentation does lead to something that's net positive, and to give yourself as an ecosystem, as an application, whatever it might be, the greatest number of total paths to capital flowing into you, whether that's just by bridging or by better intent solving systems, everything in between, right? So I think a somewhat, double-edged sword, as many have stated here. But the best thing you can do is make sure you know who is doing what in your eco, and then make sure capital flows there efficiently.
Yeah, as somebody who trades a lot, like the liquidity fragmentation is super frustrating, right? Like, it's just a big pain in the ass. But at the same time, like these blockchains are just experiments. Like, we're running experiments in society, and some of them will fail. Monad might fail. Like, Monad might not be here in 10 years, so sort of thing. So 5 years or whatever. So, but I think it's worthwhile for us to run these experiments, and we're going to have some short-term sort of friction from running these experiments and seeing how things go.
Sounds good, James. One thing, we're almost at time here. One thing that you guys excited about for the next kind of like six months, I would say, that we should kind of like accomplish, or any narrative, like one thing, just a couple of words. Could be also like a hot take, Yeah,
I mean, I'm excited about, there's a lot of different views on the DATs, like the fact that there's so many so quickly, like it's kind of like, when things have that momentum, it's a bit of a worry. But like ultimately, they are giving, everybody out there like this window into a brand new ecosystem to innovation that like in a form they're comfortable with. And, I think it's exciting as a company and a service provider to that there's such momentum, and they're going to be great customers. But just the fact that it's a window now for other people to see, like, oh, what is this DeFi ecosystem about, and like what are these experiments, like what is this innovation? Like now it's more accessible, and I love that. We wanted to democratize access to technology and innovation and finance, and that's actually another way to do it.
I think people are going to be blown away at the pace at which we get to trillions of TVL in the next 6 months, and the embrace of TradFi and large-scale crypto native in the next 6 months. You said the institutions are here. Everyone has said that for the 11 years I've been doing this, but they are definitively here right now and very active, and there are a number of projects that are going to catch people completely off guard in their scale, in their very quick scale.
I think there's probably two things, and they're slightly related. One is sort of the advent of zk-TLS type technology that allows you to very effectively bridge these Web 2 and Web 3 worlds and actually more effectively target and distribute to different user bases in a manner that I don't think has been very feasibly done to date. I'm especially interested about that when it comes to access to credit, so like taking out a loan on chain against your real life credit score. Beyond that, I'm actually pretty interested in spicy tokenization, which is to say, the T-bills and the money market funds a little bit less so, but access to things that most people cannot find through their brokerages or through their private bankers, tokenized cash flows, celebrities, royalties, everything like that up that alley is exceptionally fascinating to me, because you can build very cool DeFi instruments around that and take real value creation and make it more flexible on chain.
Yeah, I think the exploration of the different sort of privacy aspects, privacy from everybody, which is like your Zcash sort of thing, then privacy from the the public, but not privacy from the government, institutions, that sort of thing. So I think that's a necessary sort of development for payments and other sort of use cases that we're going to see come out in the next year.
Yeah, sounds
Are you
good.
talking my book?
Yep.
Yeah, one thing that you didn't mention, I'm excited about, is the conversions with the entire kind of like AI stack, right? Building trustless agent, the entire narrative around 8004, going in this kind of like agentic era is something that I'm definitely excited about. Okay, I think I learned a ton. Thanks so much for sharing your thought. Thanks so much for listening, guys. And please, a round of applause for our panelists.